So that coming down to the people. I call it the user-centered design, where I try to understand the people on ground and what actually works for them, what makes meaning for them. Remember, I said I'm designing to empower people and assist them to achieve something that is meaningful to them. And to do that, I need to work in accordance with their belief. I don't need to contradict somehow. So that is where I talk about personalization.
Hello and welcome to Digital Mindfulness. I'm your host, Lawrence Ampofo. Joining me today is Dr. Rita Orji. In this episode, Rita talks to us about the potential for persuasive technologies to touch literally every part of our lives, and how these persuasive technologies can help us to ultimately bridge the gap between where we desire to be and how we can get there. But first of all, welcome to the show. We bring you the best teachers and thought leaders from around the world to help discuss about how human-focused, digitized experiences can help shape a better future for humanity. If you're new to the show, then the best place to find out much more about us is digitalmindfulness.net, where you can find our back catalogue of required listening podcasts where we discuss everything from digital wellness to more episodes on persuasive technologies, behavior design, mindfulness and technology, and much, much more. Okay, so enjoy the show with Dr. Rita Orji. Hi Rita, thanks so much for being on the show with us today. I'm really thrilled that you can be here with us and teach us more about your work on persuasive technologies. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Rita, I wonder if you can just start by giving the audience a little bit of an introduction to yourself, and particularly, how did you get involved in human-computer interaction and specifically persuasive technologies?
Okay, thank you. My name is Rita Orji, and I am a professor of computer science at Dalhousie University and a member of Human-Computer Interaction Group, where I direct the persuasive computing group. So broadly speaking, in my research, I investigate how various technology designs influence and shape people's behavior. And my overall objective is to design guidelines and frameworks for designing technologies to assist, empower, and motivate people for behaviors that are beneficial to them and their communities. And this kind of area of research, as you know, is called persuasive technology or behavior change system. So in the era of the digital revolution, the many negative news associated with them from the media, it's very easy to focus on the negative consequences of technologies. And this is not to discredit the fact that technologies do not influence people negatively, but they also do influence positively, which is already an established fact. So my aim is actually to study the mechanism through which these technologies influence people, and then employ this understanding to intentionally develop technologies that will empower people and assist them to achieve behaviors that are meaningful and beneficial to them as an individual and their community. In my research, I argue that if technology can influence people positively or negatively, then we can intentionally design them to help people. So I guess my passion for this research actually stems from my kind of person and then my experience growing up in Africa. I traveled a lot, and during my growing up days, I'm the kind of person that like to interact with people. I like empowering people. I like getting involved in my community, and I find myself identifying problems within my community and finding a way I could actually help to solve those problems. And at the time in Africa, I noticed how I was involved in a campaign against HIV/AIDS. I noticed how there's a conflict between belief, culture, and the reality on ground about HIV/AIDS. Most people actually do believe that it's a fallacy, it never existed. Why it's actually killing so many people at a time. So that was when I began to realize that I can actually, how do I harness my training as a computer scientist to actually contributing in area that I'm passionate about, which is empowering and helping people. Mm-hmm. And in the course of finding something that gives me that balance of applying technology to empower and help people, that brought me to the research on persuasive technology. And again, traveling around the world, growing up in Africa, studying in 3 different continents, I observed that several factors, including culture, belief, influence how people do things, including how they use technology, what is of value to them. Then that brought me to asking the question, so how do we actually design these persuasive technologies to actually make them effective for people considering their uniqueness and the individual characteristics, including their culture? So I would say that that's how I found the research that matches both my training and my passion as a person.
Rita, I think that's absolutely fascinating. And everything you've just mentioned there about the potential for technology to shape our behaviors is, that topic is so newsworthy right now. And it's something that technology companies in particular are really coming under fire for, because a lot of people don't know just the extent to which their behaviors can be shaped. But I just love the way that you framed this whole discussion just now, that actually if technology can shape our behavior, and it does on a moment-to-moment basis, we can use that same mechanism to empower people, and applying it to such an important issue like HIV education, I think is really, really brilliant. But one of the other things that you mentioned was that there is that gap. There's a gap between people's beliefs and the actual reality on the ground. And again, that technology can help to bridge that gap. But I wonder if you can talk to why we as people, why is there that distance between what we believe and what actually is happening around us in reality?
I think there are actually 2 parts to this. First of all, is that if we take the individual differences side of it, I would take the example of HIV as an example of this. When you talk about HIV, sexually transmitted diseases, there are so many things that actually could lead to that. The main or the top of the list would be risky sexual behaviors. And people would tell you a lot of approaches that could be used to actually avoid this, including use of preventives and avoidance and other things. And then take all these recommendations into context and bring it into an individual's culture and religion. Then most of them begin to be invalidated by the virtue of what people believe. So that means that let me take, for instance, if I'm designing for an African who does not believe in the use of contraceptives, if one of the strategies I actually embed in the persuasive system happens to be the use of contraceptive, and this is targeted at Africans, it's already a contradiction. That basically means the technology is conflicting with their belief, and obviously it's not going to work. So that coming down to the people. I call it the user-centered design, where I try to understand the people on ground and what actually works for them, what makes meaning for them. Remember, I said I'm designing to empower people and assist them to achieve something that is meaningful to them. And to do that, I need to work in accordance with their belief. I don't need to contradict somehow. So that is where I talk about personalization, where I think I would actually learn what does it mean. It doesn't mean that they don't have other ways that is meaningful to them, that is in agreement with them, that I could employ in my technology to help them to change. So, but learning about those strategies would entail understanding the people, appreciating their uniqueness as a person, as people, and then designing technology that adapts to their uniqueness, using an approach that would make meaning to them. That is one part of it. The second part is when an individual actually intends to do a behavior, but actually the real action differs from the actual behavior.
Yeah.
There's a big gap between these two. And there's one theory called the cognitive dissonance theory, which actually tries to describe the experience that individual have, the discomfort that individual experience when they notice some gap between their intention and behaviors. So when people notice a difference between their intention and behavior, especially when the behavior is what they intended, the theory tells us that most times people actually try to adapt their behavior to suit their intention, or adapt the intention to suit the behavior. But most times what we want to happen is for behavior to be adapted to suit the intention, especially when the intention is in line with what they want to do. So, and there are many ways that persuasive technology actually harnesses this cognitive dissonance theory to design technologies that would help people. Because by nature, most times we do what is not in line with what we intend to do. And we don't even notice it most times. Take, for instance, someone want to exercise, want to be physically active. But most days I find myself sitting in the office for the whole day, getting carried away by work and loads of things that I have to do. Mm-hmm. But a persuasive technology could be designed to not only assist me by tracking the number of activity I've been able to do in a day, it could also show me the difference, help me visualize the difference between my intention and my actual action, my actual behavior, if by making me commit to a goal. Most technologies in existence are doing it. And in a week, I could commit to a goal of a physical activity goal, where I could probably say that I'm going to have like 20 steps in a day. Mm-hmm. And then if by 12 a.m. I have not even reached a 2,000 step milestone, the technology could actually use a lot of ways to help me, including suggesting what to do, considering the confine of my activity that in the office space, what can I do as an office worker to actually begin to meet that goal? And also showing me a real visualization of how much of those activities I could do to get to my goal. Most times people actually tend to be motivated by this, not only showing them, but actually suggesting things that they could do, especially things that match their own capability to meet that goal and bridge the gap between intention and behavior. So these are different ways that persuasive technology can help to actually achieve this. There are so many other ways, but this is the most common one that people are really using right now.
I think that's really fascinating, particularly for office workers, because as office workers, we tend to sit down for at least 8 hours a day, including the commute, etc. And if we do have that goal to have 20,000 steps at least, or something like that, I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about the different interventions, like how, for example, could an app or a device, how could it leverage that cognitive dissonance theory to encourage someone to take more steps? Like, would it be, for example, I don't know, something like in the Apple Maps or something like that, you've got 2 minutes to get to your meeting, or why don't you go there a bit earlier, or something like that? I don't know, like how would something like that work, say for the traditional office worker or someone who sits for a long time?
Yeah, it's actually depends on a whole lot of things, including who is the person involved, right? And what actually works for the person. Let's take, for instance, I've seen a guy who actually has a step count goal for a day. And the wife actually does have the same goal. So the main motivation and how the technology works for him is that he goes looking at the wife's own, and then the technology tells him that, oh, at that time, your wife is in 9,000 milestone, and yours is just at 5,000. For him, not having his wife outperform him, it's a very big motivation. This kind of person is competitive. So he goes, the technology that actually monitors what the wife is doing and try to tell him this is what is going on is actually motivating to him. For other people, it's more like they forgot. It's not like technology could actually tell them, oh, you've been sitting for the whole day, Rita. You could actually get up and walk around your office for like 5 minutes. or walking down the step twice would actually bring you closer to your step count. And that would just take you 10 minutes. This is breaking down the goal into something meaningful and taking the context, the office context. The context in this case is that I am in the office. That's not, if I'm in the office, it doesn't make so much sense telling me to go to the gym because I might not have that luxury. But if you tell me to go down to my office, take the stair, walk out twice, the stairways and come up, it's something within my ability. It's something within the context of what I'm doing that I can easily do. So this would motivate some people. From other people might just be, you remaining like 10, 20 steps to reach your goal. Why don't you just get up and try to finish that step count? A 5-minute walk would actually bring you closer. So there are just many ways. But remember, what is important in all these things I've said is that what would work would depend on who is the person, what is important to the person, what motivates the person. But the end goal is actually to achieve physical active behavior, to be physically active. So these are some examples of what technology can do. But the whole thing is that people are at the center of it. The user is at the center of whatever you decide to do.
I think everything that you're saying there, Rita, is incredibly important, and actually applying persuasive technologies to some of the world's biggest problems seems like an incredibly important imperative. But I'm wondering how this can be done. Everyone that's used any kind of e-commerce platform website will know the term, or anyone that reads any technology news will know the term personalization. And we know that every time we use any of these websites, that these our news feeds or our experience of that is built around how we've acted in the past. But how do we apply what you've just described using persuasive technologies? How can we apply that at scale for the billions of people that are connected to the internet and use these, not only these services, but are impacted by these life's challenges more generally?
I think just like you said, it's an enormous task that would require some bit of investment, but actually it's not as complex as you would think, basically. Because let's take, for instance, if I'm designing most of the persuasive strategies, actually, I can actually provide an individual an opportunity to choose which strategy would be appealing to him. That is the least possible way you can do that. And that doesn't actually require you to do a lot. But in the era of machine learning and artificial intelligence, you can actually learn individuals' behavior over time as they use the application and begin to adapt your recommendations, the persuasive strategies based on what you have learned about the people, on what would work and what would not work. That's actually the trend that things are going right now, is that you're using the technology and it's learning about you. It's going to assist you and it's learning about you. It's learning about what would make work for you, what would not work for you. Eventually, it's adapting its strategies, its recommendation to actually suit you and better serve you. So this might look a bit complex, but it's not as complex as we think. And just like I said, in the list of it, people should be given that agency to decide on, this is what I think that would appeal to me. But in that aspect, that actually means disclosure. They need to know what they are going to be persuaded for. You don't persuade people against their will, and that is the intentionality behind persuasive technology. Different from what we see all over in the media and everything, how people are persuaded against their will for a second party's benefit. That is different from what I do. I do things that actually want to empower people, persuade them, assist them to achieve something in line with their goal and their intention. And this, for me, is very important at the distinction between what we do and probably what other unintentional technologies out there do as a side effect.
So, Rita, what do you see then as some of the bigger challenges for applying persuasive technologies more widely into our lives? Do you think that these challenges will come from people whose behaviours are changed unintentionally or influenced unintentionally? Or do you see the other challenges really coming from a wider application of machine learning or artificial intelligence to understand people and get ever more information or data from them at a more granular level?
I think the unintentional use of technology to influence people has actually always been there. People basically do argue that technology is never neutral. It always influences people somehow. Let's take, for instance, I wasn't born then, but before technology became really so popular, things like mobile phones, social media, our behaviors were different, expectations were different. When these technologies came on, let's take, for instance, Facebook was basically designed to create some connections between people, some social connections. But over time, the use has evolved. The expectations from people have evolved. I can't count how many times people have called up on me to ask, hey, hope you're okay. We haven't seen you online. They mean they haven't seen me on Facebook. That is a bit of a shift in expectations. That means it's expected that you come often, because I actually do go. Most times people wake up in the morning. I don't know how many of us could actually go a day without having our phones. You understand what I mean? It doesn't really mean that we can't exist without them, but they have automatically become part of our life, influencing how we do things and the expectations that is on it. Most times, even helping, they kind of become the top of our priority, even when they're not supposed to, become addiction for some people. So these are some unintentional consequences of technology that are already existing. So for me, in my opinion, I wouldn't say that persuasive technology, which are intentionally designed to help people achieve a specific behavior, would have, there is possibility that there could be some unintentional consequences. But I think that is when what we could work to actually avoid, especially when the technology is intentional, is designed with the user knowing the purpose of its design. If I design an app that help you to exercise, be physically active, before you download it, you already know that I'm downloading this application to help me to increase my physical activity, to help me to track my daily diet intake, to improve my eating behavior, to watch my sleeping quality, to reduce anxiety and depression. These are intentional designs. So, and because they are intentional, the designers often mindfully work against, try to design it to avoid as much as possible the unintended consequences, which often would happen in technologies that are not intentionally designed for that. So I think it's a challenge, but within persuasive technology, the challenge is going to be minimal because people would intentionally work to minimize that. And remember, the designer have that responsibility of being ethical in their design, ensuring that their design is not going to affect people negatively when it is persuasive technology. But most of other designs that having some unintended consequences do not actually have this responsibility. Yeah, it's a challenge. And then as technology advances, things like machine learning, it's designing technology that actually learn people and adapts to their behaviors, to their needs, to their motivation, to their likes and dislikes. We are almost getting there. The algorithms are there, how to integrate them to the applications. We are gradually getting there with the increase in sensor networking, and all these things is actually getting there. The major thing I found as a bit of things we need to be conscious of is the boundary between privacy and these technologies. We should be mindful of respecting users' privacy while we're actually trying to help users, as opposed to just breaching one's privacy and security in the course of trying to help the person. So that's one of the challenges I see that we need to be conscious of as we do all these things to help people.
So Rita, I mentioned at the start of the show that the whole issue of the addictiveness of technology and its potential to impact our behaviour is everywhere. It's in the mainstream media, and it really is catching people unaware and making them very concerned. But I wonder if we can now kind of bring our conversation down a little bit, and if you can tell us just how persuasive can technology be? Just how much of an impact can it have on our ability to make day to day and minute to minute, minute by minute decisions?
I think it could be as persuasive as making one do something that they wouldn't have done otherwise. To come down to basically some examples of my own self, I use some of the step counters and trackers before I start using them. I personally would assume myself as a physically active person because of my mental calculation of the things I think I do in a day and what they should translate to. But when I got all these things and integrated some application to it to actually tell me exactly what I do, what they translate to, then I haven't actually employed a lot of persuasive technique, but the first visualization I got of my activities compared to what I have actually eaten and how much sedentary I have been was mind-blowing, because I found that I was way behind what I actually thought I am doing. So that is the first trigger. Then I went ahead and customized it to myself to actually remind me basically maybe an hour, 2 hours later, what's a summary of what I have done and what I could do. And this drastically within 1 month, I could see a transformation in my own behavior, because I sit in the office after each 1 hour, a pop-up comes up and said, Rita, you've been sitting for 1 hour. Could you get up and do this? Now, within 1 week, I said that my routine have transformed as a person, because when those alert comes in, I look at it, I say that, oh, 1 hour already, and I'm still this. I just immediately get up because of that information, going to walk around for 10 minutes and coming back to my seat. So within 1 month, things have already changed a lot. I've doubled my physical activity. There's not much. So it could say that it could mean like moving someone from being sedentary to actually physically active. It could mean that moving someone from thinking that he or she is having enough sleep when he actually does not, to getting an appropriate number of sleep that's required to keep him healthy and productive. So I do really think that in as much as it could be arguably depend on the person, but when a behavior is meaningful to people, tapping into that meaning and the motivation the person has, a persuasive technologies could actually help to transform life and empower people in a very positive way to make meaning out of their life, achieving something that they already kind of would have loved to achieve anyway.
So, wow. So listening to that and then taking into account your example at the top of the show on your work with HIV back in Africa, it seems that technology has the potential to profoundly impact society and impacts our behaviors.
So when we talk about the HIV thing, one of the things we basically noticed when we started conducting some what we call focus group study, which is where we go to the community, try to understand them, what's the practice at the moment, and how do we actually design technology if we want to empower them to make a better decision. What we found is because of cultural and religious reasons, most people are not informed. There are things you don't talk about. I mean, they don't know where to get the right information on what is the acceptable behaviors against to prevent HIV and everything. And then we came up with, okay, we're going to design a mobile application because people don't want to talk about this because of the stigma associated with it. But many people would want to open their phones and browse and talk about anything, ask anything in their phone. So a mobile agent, more like a personal assistant, in your mobile phone, telling you about HIV/AIDS. If you have any doubt in your mind about what the do's and the don'ts, You can basically type it out and ask immediately and you get the answer. Considering also, as I always pointed out, what you believe and what you don't believe. Because if someone does not believe in protective or contraceptive, recommending that as a course of action doesn't make meaning. So this is when we saw that, okay, this is making a lot of sense. And another thing we noticed that's very important, apart from the culture and the religion, when we're working in it in Africa, is that the social context is very, very important. People tend to think differently of what other people in their group are doing, people of their age are doing compared to what is actually the thing. So when we are able to place people in social contexts where they are able to help each other, discuss about this within their social cycle online without actually getting judged, we saw some positive changes, not only changing an individual, but changing as a community in their belief in what is important and what it's not. And I think that is why technology is very important. The fact that it could allow individuals some anonymity to talk about some sensitive concept, it's very important to so many people. It considers that either that you're going to be judged, you're going to be stigmatized because you can talk about this freely in the anonymity of your house, of your phone, and get adequate and the informative response on what is the action, appropriate behavior, on the ways to avoid or to behave rightly.
So, Rita, I'm wondering, are there any cultural or generational differences that you see when applying persuasive technologies to help, again, bridge the gap between intention and actual behavior?
Oh, yeah, there are so many cultural differences and generational differences. Let me give you, for example, at the time doing my PhD, I was working on an application for promoting healthy eating behavior. So we went around studying people in the restaurants, how they make healthy decisions and what they consider. And eventually, what we found in our data is like, when you're designing for people who are young, less than 40 years of age, and you want to tell them how their unhealthy behavior is going to lead to disease or death, most times it doesn't make meaning to them. Because for them, these behaviors are far down the line. When you are 15, 20, death looks like something not so close. It looks like, it doesn't make much sense to you. But when you're designing for someone who is above 40, 50, and even older, and you talk about the relationship between behavior and death or disease, this is a very big motivation for them. If you want to talk about how do I motivate one to exercise, how do I motivate them to eat healthy, and you tell them, eating healthy is probably going to help you avoid this disease, stay healthy, and this and that, it makes sense. And interestingly, for younger people, if you link these behaviors to their physical appearance, they care more about their attraction, how attractive they look, and all these things. So this is where you see some generational differences in what matters to people, depending on their age and what level of what kind of information makes sense would actually come into it. So that would inform you on how do you design the technology to show things that are of importance to the generation you're targeting. So culturally, there are also some differences. We notice that people from collective culture who tend to actually be communal oriented, these people, when you want to motivate them for a behavior, they tend to be cooperation minded. They tend to want to cooperate with others than compete. Mm-hmm. So if you want to motivate them to actually exercise, they're more likely to do it if I do it within their group. Like for young girls, if I kind of find 5 people within their group, I said, hey, you guys should work together and achieve a step count. And then if you're each able to achieve it together, then you're going to get some kind of reward. It works better for them. But for people who are from individualist culture, these people tend to be individual minded. They tend to be more competitive. So if you show them, provide opportunity for them to actually compete against others, even in their behavior. Show Rita that, hey, Rita, if you get 10,000 step counts, and then your friend, you're going to be in competition with your friend and who gets the most step counts, they'll tend to exercise more because they want to win their friend. But you know why it is good? It's not like deadly competition, because the overarching objective is to motivate healthy activity overall, but then putting them together with their friend, but in a competitive mode, actually provides more motivation for them to exercise than actually making them cooperate with their friends. So these are some cultural factors that comes into play when you're designing this system, depending on the culture of the audience you're targeting. And there's so many of such things as well we've found over time.
Fascinating. Rita, what do you see then as the future for persuasive technologies?
That's very interesting. For me, I do think that persuasive technology, the future will be that it's more like going to be more integrated into people's life, becoming more like a personal assistant, assisting and helping people in their day-to-day activities to achieve behaviors that are meaningful to them. That means, just like I said, we're going to have to be more mindful of privacy and security, because it's going to be so intertwined with our life. It will be almost impossible to separate them from our lives. However, I anticipate it's going to make life easier, more meaningful, but we need to draw the line between privacy, security, and what actually people want these technologies to do for them.
I think that's absolutely fascinating, and it's interesting how you're mentioning, that this is going to become even more like persuasive technologies are going to be even more a factor in our lives. I think one of the things that I come across a lot is that people often they don't realize that their behavior is being influenced by something. I think they think that their phones or their devices or the services they use are, like you say, they're neutral. They're just using these they're just making a like on something, or they're just downloading an app. And actually I don't know, do you think that kind of having an opting into having your behavior influenced in particular services, do you think that might become a factor, or do you think that's important?
I think it's very, very important. Actually, that should be the default. Because I do really believe that for persuasive technology to actually work and persuade you, you need to be aware of it. If it's persuading you for your own benefit, for something that is important to you, I mean, there's no big deal in making you aware of what is going on. That means you can opt in and actually be able to decide on what should be monitored and what shouldn't be monitored. Because eventually the center of the whole thing is you. So, and if you're the center of the whole thing, then it should actually motivate you in line with what your consent. So that it should be very important that people opt in and that people are made aware. Total disclosure of what it's going on. It's very important.
I think that's interesting you mentioned that, because in addition to opting in and it's just ethically important, you can also then really focus in on the behaviors that you do want to change as a person.
Exactly. Because, I mean, if let's take, for instance, a technology that we talked about recently actually works on trying to help elderly people in smart homes to prevent falls and dictate falls. So we have the smart homes that actually, based on the location and the behaviors of the person that have been learned using some kind of a machine learning technique over time, we're able to predict when the person falls or what it's likely an unusual situation happening, right? But that means you're going to monitor what's happening in that smart home, what the person is doing at the time. But you're only given the permission to monitor things that is directly connected with fall, not every other thing. In some of them, and that is what it should be, even with persuasive technology. You only monitor what the user has given consent to be monitored, not other things. In this way, the center is still the user. You have the control. The user should have the control to decide what I need to be monitored, what I need to be persuaded for, what I do not need to be persuaded for, because they are the center of the whole design, not the business or the designer.
So Rita, in this age where we're surrounded by persuasive technologies and we're hyper-connected, what would you say are the most important human qualities, and how do we cultivate those?
That's an interesting question. Okay, for me, I think that the most important ability is to decide on what is important. What is and what not, what do you consider as important and what you consider as not important? Let's take, for instance, in this connected age, one of the problems of the hyper-connected age is that we are overloaded with a lot of information, right? Both real and fake. And we have a lot of things seeking our attention at a time. If one is actually to pay attention to every time your Facebook notification pops up, every time CNN news break and everything comes up, every time you got an email alert, your life is going to be almost meaningless. You're going to be almost stressed out all the time. However, the most important thing, especially in the age of alternative facts, is to ask yourself, what is important to me as a person? Not what the society thinks I should be pursuing, because there's always something that people would say is important. So for me, I think the most important human quality in this connected age is the ability to decide on what is important for me, what would impact my life, what is important to the society I am living in that I can contribute in, and what is not important. You need to draw that line on what you need to be connected to and what you don't need to be connected to. That is the only way you can make meaning out of your life. That's all I think.
So Rita, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show. Where can people find out more about you and your work and connect with you?
Okay, I think I'm on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at Rita Purity or Rita Orji. Most of my work can be found in Google Scholar, and they also respond to emails. Anybody interested in my work can actually write me an email, and I'll be glad to answer. And thank you.
Rita, thanks so much for spending time with us today and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.